Linguistic capital is a complex yet profoundly influential form of social currency that affects not only how we communicate, but also how we are perceived, valued, and even positioned within society. Although it may initially seem like an abstract academic concept, linguistic capital operates in everyday life, influencing power dynamics, social mobility, and access to resources. Today, we'll unpack the concept of linguistic capital, its foundational theories, practical examples, and the many ways it shapes the world we live in. The idea of linguistic capital was developed by sociologist Pierre Bourdieu as part of his broader theory of various forms of capital. Most people are familiar with economic capital, which includes money, assets, and resources. Bourdieu, however, argued that other, less tangible forms of capital are equally crucial in shaping social interactions and structures. He introduced the concepts of social capital, cultural capital, and linguistic capital. Linguistic capital specifically refers to the value assigned to certain ways of speaking, certain accents, dialects, and even particular vocabularies. The value is not inherent in the language itself, but is instead created through social perception. In other words, society collectively assigns more prestige or value to certain forms of speech. This hierarchy of language forms establishes what Bourdieu calls a linguistic marketplace, where some language varieties hold more capital and therefore carry more power than others. To illustrate how linguistic capital functions, let's consider a corporate boardroom scenario. In many parts of the world, speaking with a prestigious accent or using formal vocabulary is equated with authority, intelligence, or professionalism. For instance, a speaker with a received pronunciation accent in the UK may be perceived as knowledgeable and competent, regardless of the content of their speech. By contrast, a speaker with a regional dialect or working class accent might not be afforded the same respect, even if they are equally capable. Here, language operates as a kind of currency, buying authority and respect based solely on the perceived prestige of the speaker's accent or dialect. This is a clear example of linguistic capital at work. The form of language one uses can affect access to opportunities, credibility, and even social mobility. For those who hold high linguistic capital, language becomes an asset that helps them achieve professional and personal success. Conversely, those who lack linguistic capital or possess language varieties that hold less value in the marketplace often encounter barriers to their full potential. It's important to note that linguistic capital extends beyond accents to vocabulary and specialized language use. In many professional and academic settings, individuals who can speak the language of that field, using specific jargon or terminology, possessed greater linguistic capital than those who cannot. Let's take the example of a medical conference. Two speakers might discuss the same topic, but the one who uses technical terms like pathophysiology or etiology may be viewed as more credible than a speaker who uses simpler language, even if their ideas are equally valid. Here, linguistic capital is not just about fluency in a language, but fluency in a specific context-driven way of speaking. One significant example that underscores the unequal distribution of linguistic capital is the treatment of African-American vernacular English in the United States. African-American vernacular English, like any other dialect, has a rich linguistic structure governed by its own set of grammatical rules and conventions. However, in mainstream American society, it is often stigmatized. Speakers of African-American vernacular English may be unfairly judged as less educated, less competent, or less professional, despite the dialect's systematic and expressive qualities. This bias affects speakers of AAVE in tangible ways, from employment opportunities to educational attainment and even interactions with the criminal justice systems. The unequal valuation of AAVE exemplifies how linguistic capital functions as a gatekeeping mechanism. By privileging standard English over other dialects, society effectively denies equal opportunities to those who do not conform to this linguistic norm. This hierarchy, therefore, reinforces existing social inequalities and marginalizes groups based on their linguistic characteristics. Now, if we extend this examination of linguistic capital to a global context, the dynamics become even more complex. In many post-colonial nations, for instance former colonial languages, typically English, French or Spanish, carry a high level of linguistic capital. These languages are often associated with economic opportunity, professional advancement and social prestige. Local or indigenous languages, however, are frequently devalued or marginalized, leading to a situation in which speakers of the prestigious language enjoy increased access to power and resources. This dynamic creates what Bourdieu described as a linguistic marketplace, where language becomes a commodity that can either facilitate or obstruct social mobility. In India, for instance, English holds significant linguistic capital. Fluency in English is often perceived as a marker of education, intelligence, and social class, even though India is home to hundreds of local languages. The dominance of English in urban areas and professional settings allows those fluent in English to access prestigious jobs, education, and other opportunities. Meanwhile, speakers of regional languages, while linguistically rich, often face limitations in their social and economic mobility. The linguistic marketplace thus privileges English as a form of capital, reinforcing social stratification along linguistic lines. This dynamic raises important questions about equity and social justice. If language can serve as a tool for social advancement, it can also be wielded as a mechanism of exclusion. The same linguistic marketplace that privileges English in India marginalizes speakers of local languages, creating a situation where linguistic capital is tied not only to language, but also to broader systems of power and inequality. The digital world has introduced new dimensions to linguistic capital. Online platforms, from social media sites to professional networks, now shape how language operates as a form of capital in unprecedented ways. In digital spaces, certain language forms gain visibility and authority based on cultural relevance, trends, and even algorithms. For instance, English continues to hold substantial linguistic capital online as it dominates global platforms, giving English speakers a distinct advantage in reaching wider audiences, establishing credibility, and influencing global conversations. If this video had been made in any other language, would it be reaching as many people? However, the digital realm also diversifies the types of linguistic capital available. Internet culture is highly dynamic, with new slang, abbreviations, and linguistic styles emerging regularly. Certain forms of language, such as meme culture, emojis, and internet-specific slang, can carry social capital that resonates with specific online communities, even if they lack mainstream linguistic prestige. For instance, using trending slang or emojis effectively in a post can generate significant engagement, demonstrating how linguistic capital in the digital world can be community-specific and adaptable to evolving norms. Yet linguistic inequalities persist online as well. Algorithms, which often prioritize content based on engagement metrics, tend to favor content in dominant languages. This creates an environment where speakers of major languages, especially English, can reach larger audiences more easily than those producing content in less widespread languages. Platforms like YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram amplify this effect by enabling monetization, where the potential for economic gain is closely tied to linguistic capital in a particular language. As a result, speakers of non-dominant languages may find it challenging to access the same opportunities for influence and income generation, reinforcing global language hierarchies. The impact of linguistic capital in the digital world can also be seen in professional spaces like LinkedIn, where using industry-specific jargon or a formal language style can enhance a user's credibility and perceived expertise. Those who effectively navigate the linguistic expectations of digital platforms can attract more connections, gain job opportunities, and build personal brands. Here, the currency of linguistic capital is particularly evident as users consciously shape their language to align with platform norms and capitalize on visibility, no matter how disingenuous it comes across. In conclusion, linguistic capital is a powerful form of social currency that shapes who is heard, who is respected, and who has access to opportunities. By understanding the role linguistic capital plays in our social interactions and structures, we gain insight into the subtle forces that perpetuate social hierarchies and biases. This awareness challenges us to reconsider the arbitrary hierarchies we assign to different ways of speaking, and to recognize the rich value of linguistic diversity. The next time you find yourself in a situation where language norms are at play, consider how linguistic capital is influencing the dynamics. Reflect on the values and biases embedded within your perceptions and those of others. Why do certain forms of language carry prestige, while others do not? How can we, as individuals and as a society, embrace linguistic diversity without reinforcing hierarchies?